again. Sorry for the interrupted broadcast tonight. The Wi-Fi connection kind of conked out on us over here, so my apologies for that. Anyway, so what I was talking about tonight is some ideas for a dream clinic, so to say. And so one of the ideas that I ran across is the idea of a community-designed medical clinic. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like something different in every community. Some people would like a clinic that is small. Other people want one that's big. When I was starting to do some interviews with people to kind of ask them what would be their ideal clinic, or what would their ideal physician be like, or what would their ideal practice be like, there's a lot of different things that came up. And believe it or not, well, I guess not too surprisingly, there was a lot of common themes that came up along with it. One very common theme was feeling as if you have enough time with a physician. So in part one of this broadcast, before the video got interrupted so rudely by the Wi-Fi, one of the most common things that people mentioned was simply having enough time. And when you're spending a lot longer at your hairdressers than you are at your physicians, because there was some insurance people back in the 1990s, 1980s that decided that 15 minutes, hi Sherry, thank you, that 15 minutes was like the magic number of minutes that you should have with your physician, and thus everything became built around that, the billing cycle, the appointment schedule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it started having the feel of an assembly line, so to say. And so there's assembly line pediatrics, there's assembly line internal medicine, gynecology. I remember back when I was rotating through my OB appointments, for example, as residency, and I would have these women that would come in with all these questions about their newborn babies, or the babies that were still in the womb that they were thinking, what's normal, what's not normal, and it had a little line of questions, and I could see the frustration in their eyes as the provider would come in, go through boom, 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 a few things, a couple of questions, but no, we have to take time for the next appointment. And if you do spend some time, hi Swami, if you do spend some time answering the questions, there's really not much time allotted in this assembly line clinic, which is most of modern medicine right now, in order to be able to answer even very simple questions. Not to mention taking some time to help people figure out what aspects of their lifestyle they might be interested in changing or modifying in some way in order to keep themselves healthy and not needing the physician in the first place. So this idea of having a micro practice is not a new one. There's been a lot of variations of this over the years. Some people have developed what they call concierge medical practices, and those are based on the idea that for a set fee you have access to the physician 24/7, so not necessarily to the degree that someone was available for a pop star potentially, but a little bit more like if someone's having trouble in the middle of the night, they have their cell phone, they have their physician, they can call up and say, hey, what do I do? And there's a few different models of how to do a direct primary care practice. So in a micro practice, instead of having to have thousands and thousands of patients that you know very little bit about because you're only seeing them for 15 minutes once a year, twice a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year if someone's got diabetes or something going on. But you can have much fewer number of patients, but a better relationship with those patients and a longer period of time, because there isn't somebody administratively looking over your shoulder saying, oh, you've got to move them through the revolving door of the clinic and get the next one in, next, and all that sort of thing. One of my model doctors that I'm actually modeling these ideas from And a mentor is Dr. Pamela Weibel. She's got a blog called Ideal Medical Clinic. .org, I believe, something along those lines. I'll post it in the comment section afterwards. So if I didn't exactly remember the name of the blog, we'll have it available for you. And she's actually been training a lot of physicians to be able to operate successfully in this micropractice model. Because, if you have many fewer expenses, then you don't need to have so many people to keep the place afloat. So in other words, when you call, you reach the physician directly, or maybe if it's after hours, maybe an answering machine, and then get back, because I might not, for example, if it was me, I might be in the shower or something, you never know. And so the idea is that you'd be able to have a appointment in a very short amount of time because there's not this big competition to get in the door because there's many fewer people. And so it's a type of a practice that can grow very naturally. And I was starting to think that now might actually be a okay time to start putting together, for example, a waiting list of people that might be interested in joining micropractice in the next year or so. And again, the limitation on that is by the way of the contracts with my current job, I'm not allowed to take on any additional primary care patients until such time as that contract is finished. So no promises at this very moment, but that's something I started thinking about putting together. So if that's something you might be interested in and you happen to live in the Northwest Florida Panhandle, go ahead and write to me on the Facebook page here, and I'll add your name to a potential list. Most of the physicians that are practicing this way have some way or another of interviewing with their patients to make sure it's a good fit, because just as somebody's entering a relationship with a friend or so, basically not everybody's a match for everybody. And so some people might think, oh, these videos are nice, but then they get to meet me and they're like, oh gosh, what would I do with that person, or something. And so if it's not a good fit, well, then it's then obviously then there's plenty of other physicians around in the neighborhood that would be a good fit as well. And that's another thing that I learned from working with these mentors, is that sometimes a physician might feel guilty or something about not being there for every single person on the planet. And they had this neat little exercise that was pointing out that for every person that is not a good match with one particular personality, there's a different personality out there that is a perfect match. And it was a fun exercise because we would sit down in this big circle and think of the patient who is like, I guess, clinician's worst nightmare. You describe blah, 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 whatever it is that is like makes your hair stand on end. You're like, oh, if only that, person wasn't there, et cetera, et cetera. And you think, man, if I open up this practice, what if I have like a whole bunch of people like that? It'll be a very stressful day because, there's not a good match. But once you would describe your nightmare patient, I guess, for lack of a better word, Dr. Weibel came to the center of the group and said, okay, this patient, blah, 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 and described whatever the characteristics were that that particular person just did not jive well with. And all right, now who is this person the ideal patient for? And invariably, every single person that did not jive with one of the people that was in that group, there was somebody else that was like, oh my God, I love that kind of patient. I wish I had my whole day filled with, this kind of person. And it was really eye-opening because it really is. There's a personal connection, a match that people have with their physician. And when you get that kind of stuff going, it's a lot less like work and a lot more like fun, And so it kind of gets the people away from having to try to force fit themselves into a particular mold or situation. And that's, again, with a relationship-based clinic, that's a lot easier to do. So there's a lot of talk about patient-centered medical homes and such. And this type of micro-practice, I think, is the epitome of a patient-centered medical home, because basically you get the full attention of the physician during a encounter. In other words, there's not a line building up outside the door. Occasionally people might notice that might have to step outside for one reason or another, go back and check something on the computer, and then it takes a few minutes to come back to the room, because invariably you've got a technician who says, oh, the lab's on the phone for this particular thing, radiology just called, the nurse comes by, so-and-so's over at the pharmacy and they need to have this right away, and it's very easy to get pulled away, interrupted, distracted, and so forth. Not that we mean to, get interrupted in any of these ways, but it just is a matter of numbers. If you've got 4,000 people or so trying to have service, then there's a lot of additional work that ends up having to be done, and so it can sometimes take away a little bit from the one-to-one focus on there. So let's see, what else? And this kind of practice is, I think, going to be something that will develop naturally over time. I started to mention, I think, I'm not entirely sure if it was there before the power cut out on the video, the idea of a town hall meeting. And so that is one of the central ideas of a community built practice, is that you actually stop and ask the people in the community, what is their dreams like? What would they see in an ideal practice? And as mentioned, a lot of people find that they don't have enough time with their physician. They don't feel like somebody's listening to them. They feel like, oh, they're always looking at their watch, trying to leave, and so forth. And part of that's because, as mentioned before, it's kind of built into the system, this pattern of having to constantly fight the clock and be there. Because unfortunately, the reality is that when they've got you scheduled every 20 minutes, if you spend an extra 10-15 minutes explaining a concept, explaining why this drug is a good match or maybe not a good match or anything, then the person that's sitting in line after you end up cutting into their clinic time. And then, of course, then they have a few extra minutes to sit and think about things that they want to ask about, and so it ends up going through lunch and other things, or taking on time in the end of the day. And so it basically makes it so that it's almost a necessity to have to keep pushing and pushing. And so my focus, of course, is always going to be things like preventing chronic diseases and teaching a few lifestyle measures. And so what are the pillars of lifestyle medicine? And obviously, as a family practice board certified trained physician, I'm always going to have some amount of medicines, of course, as being part of the foundation. And medicine is, of course, my profession. But what I've learned over the years is that there's a lot of things that medicine does not necessarily do as good a job on. And that's some of the chronic diseases, like, for example, diabetes. You can kind of slow things down a little bit, but you can't reverse it in the same way that you can with some of the lifestyle modifications as well. Alrighty. And things like, how do you manage your stress? How do you do relaxation? Do you know anything about meditation, for example? How to take your busy day, your busy mind, and learn how to help settle it down and find the off button, so to say. It's like everybody knows how to get on and revved up. It's very easy to get stressed out. And just as the airplane takes off, sometimes it's also nice to practice the landing pattern as well. And that can also tie into sleep, getting very night's sleep, for example. Food, of course, is one of my favorite things to talk about. If anyone has seen me in clinic, I end up, it just kind of bubbles out of me because I've been so immersed in Dr. Breger's and Dr. Barnard's websites for so long, and I've had such a profound personal effect with using food as medicine as well. It just is very natural to keep talking along those lines. Exercise, of course, movement. Everybody's got a different capacity. Some people are wheelchair bound, for example. They're not going to be running marathons, probably. Maybe a wheelchair marathon eventually, or maybe not. Everyone's got a different capacity for what they're interested in doing and what they want to do. But almost everybody has something that can be tweaked, modified, or encouragement in one direction or another. And so it's very empowering to people to be able to have a few options. I very oftentimes have people talk to me and say, oh, well, I could never go 100% plant-based. What you're asking is, too much. And I say, well, of course, you can do whatever you want. Even if people go mostly plant-based, or, plant-based once a week, or most of the plate being plants or something along those lines, you will have a benefit. It's kind of like you take your Ferrari or your high octane requiring engine, and you put more good engine oil in it or more good gasoline in it, you're going to get a better response from that than if you start pouring in corn oil or something along those lines. And so if you have a tendency to pour a lot of corn oil into your engine, and then you put a little bit of high octave or high octane in there, then your machine will tend to work a little bit better in general. And then also relationships. I mentioned talking a lot about relationships in the terms of a medical practice, and that's because that's one of the styles of medical practice that is now becoming a growing phenomenon. In this small group, right now I think there's about 200 or so professionals to network with, and once the next group graduates in this upcoming week, there's going to be about 300 people, physicians of all walks of life, who are learning about this style of medicine and being able to bring these micro practices across the entire country. And so another benefit is when you have a smaller, more flexible empanelment, and you don't have quite as much insurance demands or paperwork demands on the providers, then what you end up with is a much less stressed out provider. I've seen a few times where some of these burnout websites and stuff, they talk about basically how is it that physicians are spending about 1/3 of time with their patients and about 2/3 of their day on paperwork kind of tasks. And I was like, no, that can't. And then I started thinking about how I was actually spending my time, and I started realizing, oh, that is actually pretty accurate. 12-hour days, about 8 hours of that with patients. But even when seeing the patient, spending time typing away at the computer, getting the paperwork done, and during the appointment time. And so actually it turned out to be, when I figured out what I was actually doing, I was like, wow, this is actually pretty accurate. And so if you have better rested and less stressed clinical environment in general, then you're going to have, again, a happier physician that is seeing the patients in general. And so there's a lot of benefits to doing a micropractice clinic. So again, I think the time to start making a waiting period is now. So if anyone is interested in signing up potentially, I haven't quite settled on the method of payments and things like that yet. One of the models for that is a kind of a pay-as-you-go thing, where someone might have a initial fee for the first hi, how are you, going through the medical record for maybe an hour or 2, 3 hours, going through the going through the clinic together. That's analysis, setting up the plan, and that sort of thing. And then additional visits might be based on what the problem was, or based on how much time, or something along those lines. So that's kind of a pay-as-you-go model. There's another model out there where there's a subscription service where it's kind of like subscribing to have the physician, kind of like your family doc, where if you had a brother or sister or a parent that was a physician, you might pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got this funny thing, blah, 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 blah. And for the subscription, that you'd have access to visits, maybe 3 visits a month or something. Again, this is a new concept, and so still kind of getting hammered out as far as what people want, and that's part of the beauty of the community design clinic, is that sitting down in front of folks, you can actually find out what kinds of things they want. Where do they want it practiced? Does it matter if it's downtown, or can it be a little bit more in the boonies? Will people be willing to drive out there a little bit? And sometimes they were saying that occasionally somebody might have a part of their office building that they'd be willing to rent out, and sort of things, because they want so much to see this style of practice brought to their hometown. And so this is the early phases, of course, in planning development. If you have any ideas of what you would like to see in your dream clinic, please feel free to write them below in the comment section. And as much as possible, we'll try to incorporate it into the final product. So again, very early on, there's at least a year to plan and prepare and play and so forth. And somebody was asking me the other day if I would start to incorporating things like nutritional supplements or essential oils or other kinds of things along with this. And I'm really leaning not to, partly because when it comes to supplements, you never quite know really what you're getting. And then two, as far as things like these video presentations go, I really feel like that it lends an air of not being quite as pure, I guess, is a way of saying it. So if I was selling, for example, lavender oil, and then I did a presentation on lavender, then you might be sitting there thinking, are they really talking about lavender oil because it helps with migraines and because it's been shown to help with relaxation and better sleep and blah, 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 blah? Or is she trying to do an hour-long advertisement so I can go over there and click on the button and, buy the stuff? And I just don't feel good about that. That's, as far as these presentations go, I want to keep it simple and clean and really as beneficial for as many people as possible. Because one of my dreams also is providing education, talks, lectures, maybe books, and these video presentations, so that able to reach not just my small empanelment of folks, but anybody around the world that is interested in learning more about ways in which they can keep themselves and their families and their loved ones just a little bit healthier, or a lot healthier, depending on what kind of ideas you want to bring in there. This kind of information, it's, as I said before, it's not just my own. The people that have gone before me, Dr. Greger, Dr. Barnard, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esselson, Dr. Fuhrman, there's many that have kind of gone before and laid the foundations of a lot of these practical principles that I'm hoping to bring to light a little bit more, bring to life a little bit. And it would not be right for me to say, all right, well, I've got this wonderful information for free off of nutritionfacts.org. Now let me charge you a pretty penny for it and that sort of thing. I don't think that's right at all. And it's certainly not going in the spirit of what some of these folks have been talking about. So my little kitten here is demonstrating the benefit of sleep. It's totally curled up upside down here and showing. So if you want to learn about relaxation, look at a kitten, and they will teach you a lot about being able to go from being alert and playful to sleeping in a very short amount of time, and back and forth there. There you go. Good demonstration model here. And eventually, another thing that I would like to do, maybe down the road, and not quite sure when this will come about, but in the same line as what I was mentioning with keeping these video presentations free and open to everybody on YouTube and Facebook and so forth, but also, so this is kind of the educational component of what I'm about. But also having a little bit more of a lifestyle teaching program, which would be an expansion of the original idea. So having a small empanelment of people that I get to know personally, and being their primary care doctor, but also having a component where somebody can come in from anywhere around the world and learn and train and take home some of these principles. So maybe weekend workshops, maybe working in in conjunction with other specialists like cardiology, neurology, maybe counselors in the area, and really having a clinic where it's kind of like a Dr. Ornish style of clinic. He's got a wonderful program for reversing heart disease as well, and it's basically something that's even been approved by Medicaid, Medicare, and so forth, to be able to do with folks after they have had their heart attack issue. And so bringing in a team approach on there. So again, that would be a future project somewhere down the line. I'm thinking along the lines of maybe 10 to 15 years, maybe 5 years. It kind of depends on how things go. But that could be kind of an entire bigger clinic or institute where people could come and learn and take advantage of like-minded physicians as well. So lots to think about, lots to develop over time. But anyway, so thank you for sharing with me tonight's stream on what can a clinic be like? Is it just limited to in and out, impersonal, dehumanizing kinds of relationships where you never quite feel, did they really hear me? Oh, I didn't really feel like I trusted that person enough, or I didn't feel comfortable enough to share this additional piece of information, and that sort of thing. There you go. All right, so say goodnight to the folks out there, and thank you. Thank you for joining Daisy and I as we talk about things in the future planning stages. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.